Hello, happy Sunday. Let's start this morning, shall we? Hearing from the government. A few moments ago, I spoke to the Northern Ireland Secretary, Heaton-Harris. What is the plan on tackling small boats?
Well, I mean, there's a whole host of actions that we are taking and need to take. And what the Prime Minister said is one of his key priorities is to stop the small boats. What the Prime Minister is saying is that we also need some legislation on top of what we are doing, so we can make sure that people who come to this country illegally are returned very quickly. And that's what I expect to see in the legislation.
So just on the legislation, is it right, the reports this morning, that if you come to the UK illegally, then you're going to be banned from claiming asylum?
I believe so, yes.
So that's going to be as black and white as that?
Legislation is very black and white.
And how are you going to change the law?
I don't know. I mean, it's not my portfolio, but we get a cabinet briefing pre-announcement, and we've been talking about this for quite some time. So I don't know the actual words of the legislation, but I know it has to be extremely clear because, like in my own portfolio of Northern Ireland, I know if you're not clear, people will pick at it.
And we're expecting it Tuesday, is that right?
I've got no idea.
OK. So what will happen to these people then? If you arrive on a small boat, you're banned from claiming asylum, what will happen to them? Are they going to go back to their own country? They're going to be taken to Rwanda?
Well, quite possibly all of those things, or any of those things. But also, there is part of this is actually making sure that we have a very strong and good relationship with France, which the Prime Minister has been building, because there are, we need France also to help us in this situation. Part of it's also other European countries through which these people travel or are trafficked before they come here. So part of this is also, you could say, in our international aid budget, where we are trying to make sure economies are built properly so people don't feel the need to travel from the original country. So it's a whole batch of different things. But should people come to this country illegally, then, they will be returned or sent to somewhere like Rwanda, which is a legal scheme proven to be so in the High Court, as we move forward.
So, obviously, to stay in this country and to claim asylum in the future, you're going to need to do so through a legal route. Now, there are clear legal routes to claim asylum if you're from Ukraine, Afghanistan or Hong Kong. If you're not from one of those countries, what is the legal route?
Yeah, well, I'm quite sure there'll be more safe and legal routes, and that's why, and that's why we have them. And you're quite right; they've been proven to work. And actually, the level of illegal asylum, illegal migrants coming to this country, the number that come in, of course, all sorts of ripples, even in my own constituency, where we have a couple of the hotels that house the people who come across in small boats, have caused quite some ripples in local communities that have been very comfortable with the level of migration that we've had up until this point. And so... Ripples
in the community, we've also seen some quite aggressive protests
I know,
up in those... And organised
up in those... And people get... There are lots of people who are triggered in all sorts of ways by this level of illegal immigration into our country. So we do need to deal with this.
You mentioned there that there should be more legal routes into the UK, which feels crucial to me, because the point that I was trying to get at is that for many people, if you're from, I don't know, Syria or another war-torn country, there may not be a legal route to get to the UK other than the small boats. So is that something you're going to try and change?
Well, I mean, that is obviously for the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary, but there are also all the different skilled routes that for skilled migrants coming to the country as well.
Yeah, so but we're talking about asylum seekers here, aren't we? We're talking people who may not be able to, come through the normal economic and skilled routes, people who are fleeing persecution.
And it really isn't for me as Northern Ireland Secretary to say what they should be. That's for the policymakers in the Home Office and for the Prime Minister. But the safe and legal routes way has been proven to work, as you say, in a whole host of occasions. Over 100,000 Hong Kong Chinese. Everybody knows Ukrainians in their community that have come here and been truly welcomed. I still have a hotel full of people from Afghanistan who fled right at the last minute from Kabul, just 18 months ago, who have been truly welcomed into those local communities. And so it's really important that we need to get this right.
And you think that it should be expanded so that other people who are not from the countries that I mentioned should be having...
I think that safe and legal routes is absolutely the way forward, and we should welcome people who come through those routes.
OK. Now, I want to talk Brexit, but before we do, Ukrainian forces are under real pressure right now in Bakhmut. Reports in the Sunday Times that Rishi Sunak is set to announce billions of pounds more funding for the defence budget next weekend when he visits the US. Is that right?
Again, that's speculation, that's pre-budget, and you know better than I do that you'll have loads of politicians sat here just before a budget from the government who can't say a word about the forthcoming budget. But what I do know is that in Northern Ireland, there's a fantastic company, Thales, who are making the NTARs that have been doing such a good job for Ukrainian forces on the battlefield in Ukraine. And I know that we as a country, and the Prime Minister is completely behind making sure that we continue our support.
OK, thank you very much. Well, we'll have more on Ukraine in the programme as well, with some interviews from Kyiv coming up too. Now, I want to talk Brexit with your Northern Ireland hat on. Unionists, of course, are very unhappy about any idea that Northern Ireland could be treated differently from the rest of the United Kingdom. Now, you must be having conversations with the DUP all of the time. Are they going to back the deal?
Well, that's really up to them. I mean, currently, I understand as a Eurosceptic, you know, that actually Eurosceptics and Unionists have been let down a couple of times before by the protocol and within Theresa May's deal as well. And so, in getting to the place that we've got to, you know, we were very keen to make sure that people can read all the text and. You know, we publish it early. No one's being bounced into everything. Everybody's got the time and space.
Because some people thought that they were being bounced into it, right? We had on the show last Sunday, we had members of the Eurosceptic group saying that they were being bounced into it. They hadn't been seen a legal text.
Yeah, but now they have, and now they've had nearly a week to digest it. And you know, there's still some more time before we get anywhere near having a vote in the Commons. And I know the ERG Star Chamber I'm former chair of the ERG. I welcome its work in this area because I want them to be convinced, as I am, that this is a really good deal for the people of Northern Ireland and to understand all the implications of it.
So there will be a vote then. When's that going to be?
Well, there'll be a vote at some point when people have had the proper time to digest what's in the text. You know, we're giving lots of time and space to people to do that.
The original question, the DUP, obviously it is up to them what they do, but you must have a sense of it. You're having conversations with them, right?
Yeah, but this is I actually think there are a range, or I know there are a range of views within the DUP themselves. And so it's not for me to manage another party. I was Boris Johnson's chief whip. It was very difficult just to manage my own. So I'm not going to second guess what another political party will do, but they've asked for clarifications in a number of areas, and we are going to give them that clarification. There's technical talks that are ongoing with all the political parties in Northern Ireland this coming week about how the Stormont break will work, because that's a new, innovative way of making sure that people do have a democratic say over some of the rules that affect them.
So let's talk about that, shall we? Because that was one of the clarifications, as you said, that some people are looking for. It would effectively allow politicians in Northern Ireland to have say over new legislation passed in Brussels. Is it an actual veto, or is it just a delaying mechanism?
It's a veto.
So if Stormont and the UK raise concern, the legislation is suspended for 4 weeks. That sounds like a delay rather than a veto, no?
Yeah, but there is when the concern is raised, that is when the delay kicks in. And when it goes through the complete process, the UK government can veto.
How likely do you think it is that the UK government will be willing to veto EU law?
I think if it was going to affect Northern Ireland in a significant way, we would veto EU law.
Because the EU have said the measure can only be used in the most exceptional circumstances and as a matter of last resort.
Yeah, and we've said that it's got to have we've used the significant, the word significant, because it has to have. You can't be using a veto trivially. But I don't think actually the Northern Ireland Assembly would be using that trivially. And I think this is actually quite it's a new thing. It's a treaty change. It's being written into Article 13.3a for those that are really interested of the protocol, and that's it's a proper break, a proper veto. But I'd like to think, and having got to know many of the MLAs, members of the Legislative Assembly in Northern Ireland, that they would only use it sensibly.
Unionists are also worried about the extent to which EU law will still apply in Northern Ireland, which of course matters as the UK diverges from the EU in the future. So, if there are future trade deals with other countries, can you guarantee that people and businesses in Northern Ireland will be able to participate in those in exactly the same way as the rest of the UK?
Yeah, I think we can. And also, I mean, there is about... We're now left with about 3% of what was existing EU laws going to be in place after this gets adopted. And that's the bare minimum required to allow Northern Ireland businesses the access they have to the European single market at this point.
Can you really guarantee that Northern Ireland will be able to participate in trade deals in the future? If you diverge from EU law and single market rules, Northern Ireland, you know...
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's one of the very big differences between this deal and any previous protocol or various articles that people thought did the job. We're also going to...
And you're not worried that that quote's not going to be played back to you in like 6 months' time when the EU says, actually, no, that's not... Northern Ireland can't apply for these rules and the trade deal that you've signed with, the States or whatever it is? I'm
generally not worried about that.
OK. Confident.
Yeah.
At the heart of this, of course, is the fact that Northern Ireland is still in paralysis. Stormont is still not sitting, there's no government there. If the DUP don't back the deal, if they still continue to refuse to participate in the Northern Ireland Assembly, what are you going to do? Yeah, well, I mean, first, that's a theoretical question. I mean, I want to get over the next couple of weeks and hopefully be able to clarify all the questions that the DUP and actually others in the unionist community have, and indeed others in Northern Ireland political parties have. I'd like to think that at that point we will be able to get the executive up and running. But I've already, in fact, last week we were passing legislation through Parliament called the Executive Formation Act, which allows me to have the opportunity to call elections at any point during the next year, should that be required. There are other routes forward, and we need to do things on governance if that is the case. However, I'm a glass-half-full man. I believe we can get this right. I think the Windsor Framework is an amazing leap forward. I do think it actually delivers on all the questions that have been asked. We need to clarify some of those for some of the unionist community. I'm absolutely up for doing that. Is there a time frame by which, if Stormont isn't up and running, you're going to say, right, that's it, I need to push the button on an election? No, I've learned from previous lessons in Northern Ireland that you don't set time frames, and even if you have one in your mind, you would never give it publicly. OK. And now, you clearly think this is a good deal for Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. I just want to play you what the Prime Minister said when he announced the details of the deal. Let's have a listen.
Northern Ireland is in the unbelievably special position, unique position in the entire world, European continent, in having privileged access, not just to the UK home market, but also the European Union single market. Nobody else has that. No one. Only you guys, only here. And that is the prize.
Can you think of any other countries that used to have, the benefit to that prize as well, access to the UK market and the single market? Yeah, I hear your question, and actually, I was interested in the statement that when the Prime Minister made his statement on Monday evening, that Plaid Cymru and Scottish nationalists were saying, "Oh, we quite like that deal. Sounds like a good deal.
We'd like that deal." But we have the benefits of leaving the European Union, and we've got the cooperation agreement, trade and cooperation agreement with the European Union, and now having sorted the protocol out, I believe that Northern Ireland is in the position that the Prime Minister said it is.
It's interesting, you mentioned there people in Scotland and Wales saying we quite like the deal that Northern Ireland has. I mean, particularly in Scotland, where people voted to remain, can you see that there may be an argument that actually they should be able to have the kind of access to the single market?
So we are going to benefit from, as a whole country now, from leaving the European Union and not having laws imposed on us that we have no control over. Scotland as well. Northern Ireland was not in that place, because there's always been some sort of agreement or protocol that has not allowed Northern Ireland to leave the European Union. Now that's what we are. We are completing that job, and Northern Ireland, by accepting that there's going to be this 3% of EU laws, the bare minimum. Okay. Will also maintain its position the Prime Minister was outlining. You're
a Eurosceptic, obviously. Has Brexit made us poorer?
No.
What? The OBRs that predict both exports and imports will be 50% lower in the long run than if the UK had remained in the EU. The Bank of England predicts the UK suffering loss of business investment worth £29 billion. I understand the arguments about autonomy, about democracy, but on has it made us poorer? You say no.
I say no.
What's your evidence for that?
My evidence is that we are still a growing economy. We're doing really well. We've had
We're the only country in the G7 to have a smaller economy than pre-pandemic.
Yeah, but it depends on which year you're measuring and where. Actually, I think people were predicting we were going into a recession.
It doesn't depend on what year you're measuring. If you look at our pre-pandemic economy size, we're the only country in the G7 to have a smaller one.
So, but people. I'm a great believer that this country has got a much better future, that we'll grow quicker having left the European Union. I believe, actually, we're just about to prove that. And in Northern Ireland, we're going to prove it even more because of the deal that we've just struck under the Windsor framework. Now, I think it's very difficult to measure like with like because of a whole host of things that have happened since Brexit. There was absolutely a stutter after Brexit economically, but it's very difficult to measure that because COVID then came very quickly. The war in Ukraine came very quickly.
But that's impacted every country, hasn't it? Not just ours.
Yeah, but in very different ways, in many different ways.
OK. Now, you're good friends with Boris Johnson. He has said that the New Deal is not about the UK taking back control. It will act as a drag anchor on divergence from the EU, and as a result, he'll find it difficult to vote for it. Have you spoken to the former Prime Minister about the deal? Yeah,
I've had a couple of conversations with him, and I was his chief whip. So I'd like to think by the time we get to the vote, I'd have cunningly persuaded him that he actually needs to vote for the deal. Are you optimistic that you're going to be able to succeed in persuading him? Well, Boris is a law unto himself in many ways, but he's a great man, a wise man, an honest man, and I believe he'll come to see that it's a good idea. You say he's an honest man. The Privilege Committee is investigating whether he misled Parliament over Partygate. Is he a man of integrity? Yes, 100%. Because, of course, if he's found to have misled Parliament, do you think that is going to impact his career? Do you think he'll have to I don't think he'll be found to have misled Parliament. When I became his chief whip, we were just all this Partygate stuff had started. I saw him behind the scenes. I know exactly what he's like. I do not believe for 1 second Boris knowingly misled Parliament. You don't believe it, but that's a different question to whether he is found to have misled Parliament by the Privileges Committee. And I have to say, the evidence that they've released so far suggests it's trending in one direction. I think in this country you're innocent until you're proven guilty, and I think that I'm absolutely convinced Boris did not knowingly mislead Parliament. Allies of Boris Johnson have thrown a bit of mud, shall we say, in the direction of Sue Gray, who, of course, was leading the inquiry into Parliament from the civil service. She's now going to go and become Keir Starmer's chief of staff. Is that a problem? No, I don't think so. I think this is where Keir can help out his new chief of staff by just publishing all the messages and things he might have had with her at that point in time. I've dealt with Sue Gray in the Northern Ireland office as a civil servant. I see her as a woman of integrity as well. So I have no issue with that, and I think Keir could clear this up in seconds by saying, no, there's no. This is what we talked about at that time. There was nothing. There's nothing to see here. She'll know a lot of secrets about your party, though, won't she? She was the head of propriety and ethics, so she will know quite a lot about individuals. But she is. I truly believe she is a lady of integrity, so I'm not worried by that. OK. I just want to ask you about Matt Hancock before we end. Leaked WhatsApp messages in the Daily Telegraph show he wanted to use a new COVID variant to frighten the pants off everyone and make sure they complied with the rules. Can you understand why that might be quite tough reading for people who found lockdown very difficult? Yeah, I mean, I read the piece myself, and it did actually mention that the new Kent variant had already, there was 1,000 cases. But the problem with this particular story is that we're just seeing a partial account all the time. Now, there is an independent inquiry that's been set up that has got access and will have access to all the evidence that's available. So I actually think we should probably wait and see what that inquiry finds. Is it appropriate to conduct so much government business on WhatsApp? Well, again, we're in lockdowns, and how do you communicate with people? Email, official channels, not WhatsApp? But every decision would have been recorded officially. So, but I mean, what you're seeing in these messages are probably thought processes behind things that you wouldn't normally see. But again, they're completely partial of a moment, and that's why we need to wait for the whole inquiry to report. Did you do a little check to see what WhatsApps you've been exchanging with Matt Hancock? I will do now you've mentioned it.
Might be wise. OK, thank you very much for being on the programme today. Chris Heaton-Harris there.
My pleasure.